My name is Salloum Lindegaard. I'm a senior researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies. Together with UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, we've been conducting an assessment of loss and damage institutional arrangements across country contexts. And that's, of course, why we're here today. So this study is based on the understanding that countries, populations, international organizations, NGOs, all are seeking to an increasing degree to respond to losses and damages in practice. And to support that, we're trying to get a better understanding of current status and developments in institutional arrangements for loss and damage. And that's everything from data and reporting systems to participatory governance, institutional coordination, and response in practice. And it's across 6 country contexts. We'll be presenting from 4 of them today, 3 with findings and 1 with additional perspectives. Before we get to that, we will be starting with international perspectives on current efforts from Fatemeh Bakhtiari from UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center. Yes, Fatemeh will be starting in just a moment. And during the course of our presentations, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom, not the chat function, and we'll be gathering those questions and addressing them in the Q&A session at the end. So Fatemeh, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lily, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you from around the world that joining us. It's my pleasure today to be here to talk about the issue that moves to the very heart of the international climate conversation, the loss and damage, and also the more important than that, how we report loss and damage internationally. So around the world, we are seeing the growing reality of climate impact that can no longer be avoided or adapted to because of the hard limit and the soft limit to adaptation. And how we report, plan, and support actions together will define how effectively country can respond. And that's the important, and that's a key point here, that how we prepare ourselves or how we plan to be able to respond effectively. So during my talk, it's going to be a very brief talk, so I would like to focus on 2 key areas from an international perspective. One is how countries are reporting and planning for loss and damage, which I give you a very brief of the result of a macro level study that we have done at the center, and how international support is planning and helping turn these plans and reports into real action on the ground. So internationally, as you all know, that loss and damage is now recognized as the 3rd pillar of the climate action, standing alongside the mitigation and adaptation, being Article 8 of the Paris Agreement. So under the Paris Agreement and the Warsaw International Mechanism, there is a growing drive nowadays to ensure that loss and damage is systematically integrated into the both national and international reporting framework. So then it's not treated as an addition, but as a core part of how we track and respond to climate impact. So the combination of the strong reporting system and practical support will determine, as you know, whether loss and damage works in practice or not. And therefore, fragmented reporting or weak national framework makes it hard to coordinate internationally or mobilize finance. We already have some international system we can build on in terms of the reporting, and there are countries that they have started, and actually from what I studied, most countries, they are using this existing system to start with as the starting point, like Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction and post-disaster needs assessment, or the PDNA tool. But they have been even though they are very valuable tools in the tracking sudden disaster and economic impact, but they were not designed from the beginning to capture the full scope of the loss and damage. To be fully useful, these tools need to be evolved to capture the slow onset events, as well like drought and sea level rise, as well as the non-economic loss and damage, such as cultural heritage, ecosystem, and social cohesion. And I know that organizations like UNDRR and UNDP, they are now effectively working in order to update this tool and be able to integrate this aspect into that, to be able to capture the full spectrum of the loss and damage. So at the center, we have conducted a global review on 90 countries, looking into their NAPs and NDCs and see how they have integrated or mainstream loss and damage into their international reporting system. And what we found, actually, we showed a real momentum. We found that around half of all national adaptation plans and NDCs, they have a mention of loss and damage in their reporting. However, only around 15 of the NAPs and NDCs, they have a dedicated chapter to loss and damage. Usually it comes from the small island and Caribbean countries. They are the pioneer to have a separate chapter on loss and damage, like countries like St. Lucia, Suriname, Sri Lanka, Mauritius. And in most African and Asian countries, loss and damage is still embedded in a broader disaster and adaptation chapter, which makes it a bit hard in order to compare, coordinate, and support internationally. So, and it's not just about the NAPs and NDCs. We have also have seen the loss and damages increasingly also showing up in biennial updated report and also in some cases in the global stocktake. And it's a significant progress. So it's linked national actions into the international tracking, finance flow, and global accountability. But how international support for policy and implementation play a role? Reporting and planning of loss and damage is one thing, but making this plan into the real action is where the international support mechanism really matters. As you all know, the Santiago network is now operationalized and it's in a delivery phase and providing the tailored demand-driven technical assistance to the countries. So Santiago network help with legal development of legal frameworks and institutional reform, risk assessment and scenario planning, and upgrading data system and monitoring, which are all they are important in order to be able to have an efficient and effective reporting system in place. So this support is specific to each country, and that's the beauty of it, because it's not a one-size-fits-all toolkit. So it's a country-driven technical assistance. So let's take Vanuatu, for example. Vanuatu has emerged, as you're all aware, as a global leader in loss and damage actions and launching a comprehensive national loss and damage policy and implementation roadmap in 2025. So Vanuatu was the first country that has been approved to get a technical support from the Santiago network. So developed with the support of the Santiago network, a roadmap that shows how international partnership can help countries turn strategies into the financed and actionable step. So the policy covers both economic and non-economic, but also extreme and slow onset event from cyclone to sea level rise, for example. And also it's very interesting to see that it set out clear targets for national actions and finance, and guided by a strong governance and structure under the National Advisory Board on Climate Change and Disaster Risk Reduction. As you see that they are also building on the unit of the disaster risk reduction as the coordinating entity. So importantly, Vanuatu is also working to strengthen their data and reporting system, still, the reporting system draws on the disaster risk management tools, but they are starting new efforts to centralize and standardize loss and damage data, which is a vital step toward the linking of national system with international reporting and finance. So in general, currently at the UNEP CCC system, the Santiago Network and the Fund for Responding Loss and Damage, they are expected to expand this kind of support, helping country to move from the planning on the paper to real world and helping them with enrichment of their data and governance system. So just to sum up what I wanted to say is that international reporting and on the loss and damage is expanding, but progress still is uneven. So it needs more evolvement. And the existing system give us a strong foundations, of course, but they need to be also updated, and also they need to be more aligned with the loss and damage perspective and capturing the slow onset event and also the non-economic loss and damage. So the challenge and the opportunity for us is clear, is to strengthen both reporting and implementation so that loss and damage is not just a technical exercise, but also loss and damage reporting is not just a burden to country, but is a global effort that delivers and help countries and communities that most affected to come up with a proper response to loss and damage. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fatemeh. And Fatemeh is a policy advisor at UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, and she plays a key role in their loss and damage work, including non-economic impact, strengthening governance and institutional arrangements for reporting and supporting vulnerable groups, and also helping countries integrate loss and damage into national policies. So very useful, Fatemeh, to get status on what's going on in international efforts. And it's also a great basis now to understand when we're approaching national status and developments, what that means in terms of possible linkages with international cooperation. So thank you. And now we are moving on to national findings. And the findings that I will be presenting now are from Somalia, Vanuatu, and Vietnam. And these are 3 of 6 countries that are included in our study. And this is an ongoing study. There will be more outputs and findings coming out in the coming months. But we wanted to go ahead and share some initial findings that also have just come out in a working paper that really goes into depth with these 3 countries. And so today we'll be presenting findings from those 3, and also afterwards hear some perspectives also from Mauritius, which is one of the other 3 countries in addition to Zambia and India. So that's the full cohort. But starting now with Somalia, Vanuatu, and Vietnam. All right, so this main question that we have of how do countries in practice manage loss and damage? And as I mentioned before, this is everything from their national policy frameworks to responses in practice to the kind of data systems and so on that are part of that and enabling that. We try to cover the full spectrum. And we're doing this across climate and development contexts. And so we have these 3 countries that we're presenting today here. And obviously very different contexts, and trying to see, what are the different opportunities and challenges, what are their kind of gaps or kind of similarities coming out across these, and that's some of what we will be sharing as well. So we're going to do 1-by-1 country assessments, and we're going to include points here on current status and developments in loss and damage policy frameworks and response, coordination and inclusion, kind of participatory processes as well. And coordination, this is both within state structures, but also with non-state actors, because there's many actors involved in loss and damage. Data reporting systems, capacity, status, and gaps. This is human and technical capacities, and learning and scaling. So we'll go through those very briefly for each of these 3 countries, and you can get much more details in the working paper that is available at DIIS.dk. And we will also be presenting some initial cross-cutting findings and way forwards, but these are drawing on the findings from these first 3 countries, and we'll of course be developing these as we go and add the full kind of cohort, put the findings together. So we'll jump right in. In our country assessments, we're drawing on institutional mapping of relevant institutions involved in the loss and damage space. review of documents, policies, and secondary data, and also new primary data, where we're drawing on interviews and questionnaire data from a range of stakeholders to understand their kind of perspectives and gain their insights. And this is state actors from national to subnational levels, as well as non-state actors, including international organizations and local organizations and NGOs. And so a lot of what we're drawing on today and presenting today is these perspectives from different stakeholders on current status and developments. And we'll also have a few kind of quotes along the way just to illustrate what perspectives are coming up. So for Somalia, located in the Horn of Africa, extremely fragile, also a challenging context in terms of vulnerability and conflict. In terms of loss and damage, institutional status and developments. We're seeing a very early stage of loss and damage policy development, but then this backdrop of institutional and capacity challenges. It's centered around disaster management with some key efforts with early warning systems and anticipatory action. We have a high reliance on international support, so international organizations are very much a part of the international landscape and response. And there are current efforts to improve weak and uneven coordination, and this is both within the national state context and also between state actors and international organizations. So in terms of coordination and inclusion specifically, there have at times been weak coordination among international organizations and with state actors, leading to some challenges. And uneven coordination and cooperation between national and state levels. You have a federal system in Somalia, and there are very different relationships between the federal, state, and the national level, which also is clear in the loss and damage response. Participatory processes are also uneven and are limited by resource constraints, and where they are present, they do have limited impact. For data and reporting systems in Somalia, these focus on post-disaster needs and reporting, and we're seeing gaps in non-economic losses and damages, and also in relation to kind of localized events, as well as uneven capacity across states. And data fragmentation, because we have so many different actors involved that are involved in data and reporting, this also is leading to fragmentation in data and data systems. And as this international non-state actor describes, it's very much reactionary. For capacity status and gaps, significant technical gaps, and this is in forecasting, early warning, and anticipatory action, as well as data systems. There's been a lot of focus to develop these at national level, but you still have very significant gaps also at subnational levels. And also human resource gaps and national level gaps in policy development. For learning and scaling in Somalia, we have national ambitions for scaling, but these are challenged in practice. There are some positive examples and also a role here for international organizations, as you also see from the second quote here, that have played a big role, and a lot of experience locally and a lot of efforts that have potential. So there's also a national actor that mentions that there's very good at piloting, but scaling is an issue. So, definitely a challenging institutional context with a lot of institutions involved. It can lead to fragmentation, but also there are some complementary capacities there that we're seeing. And now we will move on from Somalia to Vanuatu, a very different context, Pacific small island developing state. In terms of loss and damage, institutional status and developments, as Fatemeh mentioned, we're seeing very rapid policy development and program in Vanuatu, active with UNEP CCC processes and receiving support as the first country from the Santiago network. In practice, though, loss and damage efforts are still developing. So while we're seeing a very active national level policy development, program development, when we're talking to subnational actors, they definitely describe gaps in practice. For coordination and inclusion, we're also hearing from stakeholders that there's weak coordination across levels of government. And also vulnerable groups and communities can engage, but there's inconsistent or limited policy and programming impact. And a subnational state actor describes this, still feeling the need for more meaningful inclusion. For data and reporting systems in Vanuatu, the reporting is integrated with disaster response and climate change adaptation. And as Fatemeh mentioned, which is common, especially with post-disaster needs assessments. And then again, slow onset and non-economic losses and damages are not yet well captured, but there are some growing efforts. And respondents also described that data collection could be better systematized with integrated processes and systems across levels. For capacity, status, and gaps, human resource capacities are stronger in certain areas, central islands, national levels, in other marginal areas weaker. And again, this role of non-state actors is coming out clearly. Technical systems and gaps are existing and described there. And one subnational state actor also describes these, that it's especially decent during emergencies, but underdeveloped for prevention and resilience. And finally, for learning and scaling. So we're seeing barriers to learning and scaling in Vanuatu and linked to limited decentralization of authority and resources, and also this coordination between state levels. So the kind of feedback mechanisms between subnational and national levels is coming up here. There are opportunities, again, extensive local initiatives, experience and knowledge, and also this role of non-state actors we're seeing as important in learning and scaling. And one international actor describes there's a need for greater institutional support, funding, and formal pathways for scaling that are not yet there. So you see in Vanuatu both a very active kind of state engagement, international engagement, but also a lot of needs in practice and at subnational levels, and linking those subnational and national levels as well. And moving on to our final context, Vietnam. So Southeast Asian country that is very exposed to climate impacts. Development-wise, it's in a different place. It's a lower middle income economy. But also with a lot of challenges and also a lot of experience with damages related to climate. So for status and developments for loss and damage institutions, this is not a well-defined policy area, but it is being mentioned. In practice, it falls generally under disaster management systems, and these are quite robust, but again, that can come with gaps, as Fatemeh described. Also seeing this gap with non-economic and slow onset impacts, and current developments, there is ongoing state restructuring in Vietnam, which is changing the kind of institutional landscape in relevant ways. Coordination and inclusion. So we have this kind of highly structured reporting and response across state levels, and restructuring may further align this. We have cross-sectoral cooperation and mainstreaming, but some gaps there, despite efforts for mainstreaming. Engagement with minority and vulnerable groups is not systematized, and there's also limited space for non-state engagement. And so an international perspective here, where reflecting on challenges around, again, coordination, policy harmonization, limited capacity. For data and reporting systems, so data and reporting systems for disasters are well established, and there's great coverage of economic and material impacts. There are some gaps on quality there. But again, this slow onset non-economic losses and damages, that's a cross-cutting theme that we're seeing very clearly. Also this quality issue that I mentioned, and that also data could be better utilized beyond just hazard-specific responses. For capacity status and gaps in Vietnam, where we see forecasting, early warning systems, they've been there for years, can be strengthened. There are also some other kind of technical areas that could be strengthened for better policy and planning. Human resources, officials' capacity could be very much supported by a clear policy framework, implementation guidelines as well. And there are complementary competencies between state and non-state actors that could be engaged with more clearly. And this is a reflection here from a subnational state actor saying very clearly that in terms of non-economic losses and damages, they're unsure of how to report them, and even if they have the information, how to support households and individuals experiencing them. For learning and scaling, lack of explicit loss and damage roles and responsibilities are a challenge that are limiting formalized kind of engagement and learning. There are existing examples of learning and scaling, but these are often along these kind of very clear vertical reporting lines, and we're seeing less horizontally between across, within a level of government, and also with kind of diverse actors working at the same level. And these kind of state and non-state complementarities, as well as state restructuring, could offer some further opportunities. So some very different contexts there. but we're already seeing some similarities across these, as well as kind of diverse institutional starting points and engagement with loss and damage as a developing area. So moving on to some cross-cutting findings and ways forward. These are just, we're going to provide a very quick overview for you here today, and then we'll be able to kind of, well, you have them in the working paper, which is available at our website, where we really go into depth. All right, so for reflections on kind of current institutional status. So the first one, we're seeing some strong institutional foundations, but we also see gaps in terms of, I mean, there's a need for further development, we're all aware of that, but especially integration across sectors, levels, and actor types is needed. So we're seeing these vertical disconnects between national levels and subnational levels, which is coming out clearly as a very, and it's informing a lot of challenges in terms of both kind of reporting and response efforts and kind of learning around loss and damage. And then we're also seeing horizontal fragmentation, where we have a lot of different actor types involved, and also across kind of ministerial silos and sectors. We also have gaps in data collection, analysis, and application of the data that are undermining loss and damage knowledge and response. And so these are, I mean, they came out very clearly in all three of these country contexts. Non-economic losses and damages is a major data gap, and slow onset impacts. And there are there is some reporting on these things, but it is not as robust and is not as systematic as with more material losses. And then there's also this issue around data systems, analysis, and application of data. So it's often very reactive and hazard specific, and not as forward-looking in terms of applying data gathered and having the systems that are actually able to apply that, analyze that, and feed that into policy and planning. And learning and scaling are limited, and this is linked to institutional fragmentation, lack of integrated data systems, and then these weak feedback mechanisms, and that's linked to these first 2 points as well. And finally, for ways forward. Again, these are initial reflections just based on some findings from the first 3 case countries. So the first, this kind of loss and damage visioning that's context specific can really help us understand climate impacts in relation to local contexts. And not only that, but it's also, and this is something that's being done in Vanuatu, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops. But this is also an effort to kind of explicitly link national approaches to international efforts as well. So not just, I mean, very important, we know loss and damage can be very context-based. And so not only linking to the actual felt impacts in the country and of course the institutional needs that prompts, but also that the country is then defining their kind of needs in terms of also international efforts. Second, loss and damage data and reporting systems and institutions should, of course, be inclusive, integrated, and resourced with a roadmap for development. So there's a lot to work on, and this will necessarily be a question of priorities over time, because it will take time and also resources. And so as we're moving towards systems and institutional arrangements that can address some of these gaps, and as we were hearing before, kind of being able to prepare ourselves for this, having kind of a clear roadmap for development that also kind of incorporates some of the findings that we're seeing now. And finally, forward-looking approaches can be institutionalized with loss and damage assessment and response as a learning process, because losses and damages, they are themselves developing. We're learning much more as we do gather data and analyze it in new ways, understanding what's going on in practice. And of course, there will be some trial and error as well. And so institutionalizing this as a learning process will, of course, be very important for countries. So how to do that is one of many questions that countries will be dealing with going forward. And hopefully these findings can support those considerations. So that's it from the first 3 countries. Thank you for your attention. You can find detailed information in our working paper. And as I mentioned, there will be more outputs coming from the study. Now, what we will be doing next, if I just figure out how to take out my unshare, might take a second, just a moment. I'm struggling. Okay, We will now be hearing from Marie, Stéphania, Perrine. And Marie Stéphania is joining us from Mauritius. She is a climate and development specialist and has experience across adaptation, project management, and capacity building in smaller island and developing states. She's a former UNEP CCC Capacity Fellow, Chevening Scholar, and EU COMESA Scholar, and we're so pleased to have her contributing to the study. She's been coordinating and carrying out data collection in Mauritius and providing insights. So please, we are looking forward to hearing perspectives from Mauritius. Thank you.
So good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Lily. So let me just share my slides. Okay, is it fine, Lily?
It looks great, thank you.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So as mentioned, I'll be sharing insights from the loss and damage project in Mauritius. So a little bit of context. So Mauritius is an archipelagic state situated in the Indian Ocean. It is comprised of the main island, that is Mauritius. And then we have outer islands such as Rodrigues, Agalega, Tromelin, Saint-Brendan, and the Chagos Archipelago. So Mauritius has a very vast exclusive economic zone. And the population as of 2024 is about 1.2 million, with most citizens living on the main island, that is Mauritius, and while in Rodrigues, which is the other most populated island, there is about 44,000 residents. So this context underscores that Mauritius' small landmass compared to its very large ocean territory, it highlights the need for integrated approaches to climate risk and also to manage loss and damage across the different islands. So the project in Mauritius started earlier this year, around February, March. So I've been collecting data with different stakeholders in Mauritius, including government officials, NGOs, and people working in academia. And we can see that in Mauritius, loss and damage, it is gaining traction. So it was included in our first biennial transparency report in 2024. However, we do not have a national policy or legislation that explicitly address this issue. So existing frameworks like the Climate Change Act 2020 or the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Policy. So they touch mostly on relevant aspects, but they remain fragmented. So the institutional landscape is compartmentalized, that is, with all of overlapping responsibilities and limited coordination across the different ministries that we have in Mauritius. So the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Center is the key institution that coordinates everything related to disaster, especially during emergencies, but collaboration with NGOs and communities, so far it tends to be project-based. And we see that through the different consultation, we've seen that coordination remains one of the main institutional bottlenecks. That is, in terms of roles and mandates across the different ministries, these tend to be a little bit unclear, and coordination often happens after a disaster. So that is, when a disaster happens, you will see all the different institutions gathering together to sort of do post-disaster assessment. So public participation has improved over the years. There are more and more consultations with NGOs, with local communities. But however, it is mostly largely top-down. And the same participants, we can see that the same participants, they are often involved in consultations, which tends to impinge of participation from vulnerable or marginalized groups. Those groups, they tend to be unrepresented. So many respondents highlighted the need for a national coordination platform to facilitate collaboration and knowledge exchange between the different entities and government institutions that exist in Mauritius. So in terms of data, so as Lily has mentioned before, in Mauritius also, we see that data fragmentation is a major challenge. So most data collection focus on economic losses such as damage to infrastructure after a disaster or after a cyclone, after or a flooding event, or damage in crops. So the non-economic aspects such as impacts on health, on livelihoods, on cultural heritage, those are not systematically captured. And we've seen also during the different consultations that more and more people, they tend to become anxious, insecure, and stressed, for example, whenever there is an alert for torrential rain or for flooding. Those people, they become very anxious because they know that those especially living in informal settlements, they know that they are going to lose everything in terms of materials for their children to go to school, or even the materials in their houses, and they know that they will have to rebuild and buy things again. So, but for now, those aspects of loss and damage, they are not captured. So ministries, they collect data independently, and NGOs on their side, they also collect data, but they often collect data related to information to support their own response work. So there is currently no centralized data system, and slow onset processes are rarely captured or recorded. So the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Center is developing they are currently developing a disaster information management system. So far, they are using the Sendai framework to record disaster events. But on their own, they have decided to develop a disaster information management system, which they think it will be appropriate to collect and to integrate more reporting. But the thing is that awareness of such initiatives, it remains limited. So it's not known by other ministries. And also the issue is that funding for implementation, they are right now facing challenges in terms of getting the funding for implementation of that system. So in terms of capacity status and gaps, so across all sectors, awareness and understanding of loss and damage, it remains low. So there is no designated loss and damage focal points within the ministries, and technical knowledge on reporting, on data reporting, or how to integrate loss and damage into policy, it is limited. Training opportunities exist, but they are irregular. That is, they are offered on irregular basis, and we often see that it doesn't reach the local communities or the local officials, those technical officials that really works with the community, or even the NGOs. And we also see that during the different interviews, we've seen that there is also a gap in terms of human resource working in the different departments. So they have a lot of work to do, and this is a challenge that most departments they are facing. And so there is the Community Disaster Response Program, which is one initiative which has been working quite well in the community. So, but it has faced challenges in terms of continuity. And in terms of early warning system that exists in Mauritius, they remain limited in coverage. And there is also issues in terms of communication. So how the local authorities communicate information about, for example, flooding or about torrential rain. So this tends to be limited. And in terms of learning and scaling, so good practices in Mauritius, they are still in early stages. So Mauritius right now lacks a mechanism to document and replicate successful local projects. So as mentioned, the Community Disaster Response Program. So this was developed after officers, they received training in Japan, and they replicated that program in several vulnerable communities. But as mentioned before, there is a lack of continuity, and the main challenge is access to funding to implement and to continue the program. So this kind of hinders scaling up also. And also we've seen that local councils and the different NGOs that work with local communities, they have valuable experiences that could inform national plans, but these are not yet being systematically captured. So overall, the findings from the different consultations that we've had point to both strong foundation and persistent gaps. So in terms of, for example, Mauritius has the potential to enhance its disaster management system. It has a robust enabling legislation already, but implementation remains fragmented. So we've also seen that coordination, data management, and capacity gaps limit effective action. Community participation is improving, but still ad hoc. And slow onset and non-economic loss and damage remain largely outside the system. So at the same time, there is growing recognition among policymakers and practitioners that an integrated loss and damage framework is urgently needed. And so looking ahead, several priorities emerge. So first, Mauritius should develop a national government's framework for loss and damage to clearly define institutional roles and responsibilities. We also need inclusive, community-driven, and a disaggregated data system that go beyond economic loss, that is to encompass also the non-economic aspect of loss and damage. And also multi-stakeholder coordination must be strengthened through a national platform that groups government, NGOs, academia, and communities. And something which is very important is capacity building. So capacity building is needed at all levels, from national planners to community leaders, and it will help enhance the knowledge and also help the country to better assess its loss and damage. And finally, something else which is also very important, Mauritius being a SIDS, it is important for Mauritius to connect with other SIDS through peer learning and knowledge exchange to advance institutional approaches to loss and damage governance. So that's it from me, Lily. I give you back the floor.
Thanks very much, Stéphania. So we're seeing, again, some clear areas of overlap between the country contexts. And just to mention a few, this kind of fragmented institutional landscape, certain data gaps in terms of non-economic and slow onset impacts, lack of centralized data systems, and also kind of an increasing room for participation, but something that's not well systematized yet. So thanks very much for those perspectives from Mauritius. And now we will move on to our question and answer session. I can see there are already a few questions in our chat, well, not in our chat, in our question and answer tool. And so we'll set up a panel now with the three of us, myself, Fatemeh, and Stéphania. Great. All right, so the first question that we have in our chat is our question and answer. Do you have the tools for loss and damages assessment? And I'll just say very briefly, in the working paper, we do reference one toolkit that has been developed with a kind of methodology for doing an assessment. And this is kind of to get a better understanding of losses and damages. It's a very kind of detailed assessment. And Fatemeh, maybe I think you can say a bit more about the work that you guys have been doing and work with reporting. And Stéphania, if you have anything to add. So Fatemeh, please.
Yes, thank you, Lily. Yeah, at the center, we are developing some tool. The first one is under the CBIT project, or Enhanced Transparency Framework. We are developing a tool in order to help country with needs assessments for loss and damage to just assess their capacity and come up with what they need. So that could be a useful tool that we have that can feed into when countries are putting together requests for Santiago network, so they can use that tool in order to categorize what type of need they need. So that will be out hopefully by end of this year. If not, then by early next year. Also, we are developing another tool, or is like a toolkit or a step-by-step toolkit to help country to establish the governance and institutional arrangement for loss and damage reporting. Learning from that global stocktake study that I mentioned, and also building on what we have learned from working with different countries, as you heard it from Lily's presentation. So that also we are aiming for also early 26. Together also we are we may also have it with some indicator that we have developed over the last years for different sector, best practice indicator for both economic and non-economic. So that could be like an inspiration for an expert when they want to start the assessment. What type of indicator exists there, or what are the indicators they have been recommended by different experts. It's not like a prescription, so it's just there as a menu of options, then they can build on. Yes, thanks.
Great, thank you. And so for someone interested, these, for instance, the one that you're working on now, this will be made available on your website as soon as it's ready. Okay, so the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center website, you can check that, and there will be more coming with the assessments in particular.
Yes.
Did you have something to add, Stéphania, about assessments? Do you have any
No, not
tools?
for now. No.
Okay, great. The next question we have, thank you. Someone has noted that the results were extremely insightful, and how are countries using these to better understand and close capacity and financing gaps, as well as overcome challenges and address needs to better respond to loss and damage? Are there any examples of catalytic impact of the findings? Well, from my side, this is something that I would very much hope for, but these findings are something that have only just been analyzed, written up, and published. And for Stéphania's findings, for instance, from Mauritius, this is the first time they have been shared. And so this is something that we definitely hope for from the study, and we will be working to get the findings out widely. And from my side, I am based at a research institution and don't engage directly in capacity building, programming, or policy support with governments in the same way, maybe as UNEP, but maybe Fatemeh, you can say a little bit more about UNEP's work with country governments, and Stéphania, if you have anything around engagement in Mauritius.
Yes, thanks, Lily. So at the center, we are working. I just shared the link to our website, which you can see an overview of different project and thematic area that we are working on currently. For example, one project that we have, it's to help countries with development of a loss and damage national framework, but also focused on the urban level as well. So under this project, we help countries to develop methodologies for both economic and non-economic loss and damage assessment, looking into also cost of inaction, and to be able to come up with the profile, loss and damage profile of how would the response scenarios or the addressing scenarios, let's say, would cost. So then helping country with having some sort of analysis or data in place, and In the last phase of project, we also help with this three countries that already we have, India, Mauritius, and Zambia, to be able to put together an application for asking more needs, either to Santiago Network or Loss and Damage Fund or any other available fund, just to give them an option that together with the partner, the local partner, is not just us as an expert coming. It's very much also based on the capacity building perspective, and it's funded by Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. So that's one way that we are looking into helping country to approach different available funding in place. And then we do have also other thematic area that very much focused on the M&E system for countries. We have it under also another project with UNOPS or ICAT. So you can see it also with Panama, for example. We are looking into development of the indicator for national loss and damage reporting, focusing on the agriculture, health, and human mobility. And that links to also their national adaptation M&E system and how they can fit into each other. And also when it comes to the limit to adaptation, how to define those indicator and which indicator is more relevant to adaptation and is not really a pure, is relevant to loss and damage and is not adaptation. So these kind of things you can also, I can share with you also the link to the website. So that sort of things that we do here as well. Our perspective is also to expand in the area of climate finance, but at the moment we are not really developing like any innovative finance instrument or structure for countries to have. So that's where we are so far.
Thanks, Fatemeh. We also have a finance question coming up soon. But Stéphania, did you have anything to add?
Yes, so building on what Fatemeh has mentioned in terms of a project, so for a small island like Mauritius, such projects are most welcome because loss and damage is something which is fairly new to Mauritius and to Mauritian in general. But we've seen that over the years, we've been facing a lot of climate challenges, especially in terms of flash floods and recurring cyclones during the summer period. And now we are facing new challenges in terms of drought. So already the rivers are, the water access, it's going down, and there are already so there's sorts of issues warning about reducing the number of water that's being used. So one thing is that this project in itself, it is raising awareness about loss and damage. And also it is putting in light the different challenges, and also from what we've had during the June workshop that we've had, we were able to present different scenarios on what climate issues Mauritius will be facing in the coming years. So it is a project which is most welcomed by not only the government, but also by different NGOs and local communities that we've engaged with. So there is a need to build more awareness on that. And I would say that this project, it is already a stepping stone. And now we are going to build on that to raise more awareness about loss and damage, but also about climate change in general. Because Mauritius, as I mentioned before, it has different archipelagic islands. So the challenges that Mauritius faces in terms of climate change, for example, Rodrigues Island, it doesn't face the same challenge. They have different climate challenges, different development capacity, and these are all things that need to be taken into account. And also, so this project, it will enable Mauritius to better collect data, to implement a data collection system, especially for the island to be able to access the loss and damage fund. So again, this project is most welcome, and it is bringing to light also a lot of how would I say, link that can be explored in terms of collaboration between different ministries and with different NGOs and the local community. So back to you.
Thanks, Stéphania. And this is also something that I've been seeing in some of the countries we're working with as well in the study, that obviously we're going through about this by engaging with a lot of the key stakeholders that are involved in this space. So in that way, starting also some conversations, and then with Fatemeh and the very concrete work that you're doing, also that this study and the kind of partnerships that studies like this are, that they can be a very strong link in contributing to policy engagement directly. All right, a couple of more questions left. So one on finance, as mentioned. So how to measure the loss and damage public finance. This is from Hans-Peter Dijkgaard, and he's been making an Oxfam Care Climate Finance report, and they're unfortunately not able to make such a calculation for loss and damage. They're lacking a RIO marker similar to what OECD countries have for adaptation and mitigation. And he writes that, I hope you will consider such a recommendation. I'll also then just mention the next question and together, and we can take a final round, I think, before wrapping up. The final question is, what role is there for resilience building? Does that fall under what the speakers categorize as capacity building, or does most of it fall under response and react? So for our two final questions, Stéphania, do you maybe want to start this round? And this will also be kind of our final comments from the panelists.
So on the question, what is the role, what role is there for resilience building, and does that fall under what the speakers categorize as capacity building? So I would say yes, because again, for islands like Mauritius, capacity building is very important. So why capacity building is important? So in terms of letting the population know about climate change itself. So people in Mauritius, they know about climate change. They know what climate change is happening, but the whole understanding about the whole process and how deeply climate change is going to impact their lives now and also in the future. So people, they are not totally in phase with that. So far, we can see that people in Mauritius, they are living their life business as usual. So I mentioned the water issue. So you will see a lot of people complaining about why we need to reduce our water consumption or to take care about how much water we are using, because they're used to having the water. They're used to having the water. So this is a new situation that they will need to adapt to. But there's a need to explain to the population that this is happening and it's going to be more than that in the future. So yes, capacity building for us in a small island developing state, it is something which is very important. So, but sometimes we see that capacity building, it is offered mostly to people working in different governments, or it is people in touch with climate-related matters that are offered capacity building opportunities. So it doesn't really reach those at the ground level. So there's a gap there. And we need to work on that to see how to provide more capacity building, how to share the knowledge, but in a language that the local community understand, so that they adapt better to the challenges that we are facing now and to the challenges that we are going to face in the coming years. So yes.
Thank you very much. And Fatemeh.
Yes, thank you. So related to the last question about the resilience building, let me just the question, what role is there for resilience building? So I just wanted to also mention that at the center, we try to linkage between nature-based solution project or use of nature in order to minimize but also address the loss and damage. So meaning that the loss and damage project, they do have a component of resilience building and also the capacity building as well. And that's exactly comes to the point of adaptation limit, very much on the soft limit to adaptation, which by having the project, of course, the project is the loss and damage project, but what we are looking into is looking into the current adaptation scenarios or strategies in place, and then trying to find what are the limitations to the adaptation and how much of it is a soft limit that we can do more in order to address them and improve the resilience and reduce the residual impact. So in this sense, definitely our loss and damage project, they do have a component of resilience building, and then also very much looking into the ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solution in a way that helps to minimize the loss and damage. Related to your question, Hans-Peter, about the finance, yes, you are absolutely right. Currently, it's quite difficult to use or having a loss and damage a marker. There is no marker exist yet for the loss and damage. So OECD that Rio marker, as you mentioned, is track mitigation and adaptation finance, but we don't really have any indicator or any standardized or agreed indicator for to capture the loss and damage. So that's why donors self-report usually like inconsistency making or inconsistent, and many of them categorize loss and damage activity as adaptation, or especially when it comes to residual risk management or humanitarian aid. So as a result, as you mentioned, also there is no global data set currently to quantify the loss and damage finance flow. But like maybe there are like some suggestion here and there, some few possible approaches that could help to measuring the loss and damage finance, like public finance mostly, but there is no agreed way. So I can talk about it, but we can talk about it later. For example, using the proxy-based tagging, like identifying those activities and financial flows that most likely can qualify like as a loss and damage related, like post-disaster reconstruction, for example, or risk transfer or social protection for climate shocks, looking at that and have them as a tag, or develop a keywords or categories for tagging with existing finance data set. For the different portfolios, like tagging entire mentioning of losses or reconstruction, for example, or recovery, for example, or like some other method, like a qualitative classification, for example, very much based on the stakeholder consultation. When it comes to loss and damage, for example, looking to addressing unavoidable or already occurring impact to help in estimating share of the adaptation versus loss and damage within existing portfolio. Actually, we had a collaboration with Adaptation Fund to produce a knowledge product looking into how we can learn from a current project that they have been financed by Adaptation Fund, that how much of that or what are the criteria that we can come up with that also touching the loss and damage component. And in there also we have learned that within the adaptation project, they do have a component of the loss and damage, and this stakeholder consultation and this tagging method could be one way to identify and come up with some sort of a measure.
Fatemeh, I will jump in there because that is our time for today. And maybe is that also something that's available on your website?
No, we can talk more about it.
Get in touch with Fatemeh. That's what I'm hearing.
I'll write to you, Hans-Peter. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that's our time for today. And thank you to Stéphania and to Fatemeh for sharing your insights today. Thank you for all of you who participated. We hope that this was useful insights. And as we mentioned before, this is only the beginning and the first outputs from our studies. So please do stay tuned, and we look forward to being in touch with further study outputs and insights. Thank you and have a great day. Goodbye, everybody.